Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Mayank and today we are going to do the third video in the DevOps series. In the last video we talked about Git and GitHub and how we can manage our source code in remote and local repositories over GitHub. And in this video we are talking about another important tool in the DevOps space, which is Docker. In this video about Docker, we will not be doing any presentations or illustrations to help you understand any concept behind the tool, but rather I would like to take you along with me on my command line terminal where I can explain you better about what Docker is and what we can do with it. So without any further ado, let's dive. As you can see, I have now logged on to my AWS console to start with the things, and I will be creating a server where we can install Docker and test the basic functionalities. So I'm going to head over instances section and I'm going to launch an instance here. So let me just fill this form quickly so that we can get started with this. So I'm going to call this Docker server, and I'm just going to go up with an Ubuntu image with the default configuration. I'm going to use T2 micro, and let me just select a key. I will be using master server key. That is something that I generally use, but you can definitely create a new pair of keys and continue using that. And finally, I'm going to allow HTTPS and HTTP traffic from everywhere and only SSH from my IP, that is just to block unwanted SSH connections, this being a public instance. I'm going to add some storage here if we require, because Docker images generally they tend to accumulate and it will require some extra storage. So I think that's pretty much it, and I'm going to launch this instance. Now AWS is really helpful when you want to just try and test around stuff, because instances come up very quickly and it's responsive. So if I can just go and see it's creating this, and I am going to wait for some time while this is ready. So just let's give it a minute. Maybe it can get started anytime, but as you see it's running now. So I think this is good for us to connect now. Now to connect to an EC2 instance, we've got multiple options. We can use EC2 instance connect or session manager or serial console or an SSH client. My preference here is always an SSH client, because I have that freedom of managing multiple sessions, and my go-to tool is always putty. So let me fire up putty and try to connect to this instance. Well, you have most of the details here. What you need is the IP address or the host name of this particular application, and you can put it here. And since I'm going to use a key-based authentication, I'm going to provide my key here, which happens to be in my download keys directory. Now one more thing that I can do is set the username, but I'm not going to do that, or maybe I will do that, but that is not a necessary thing. So I'm just going to go to session again, and I'm going to save this session as, let me just try to put a name here, and I can call it Docker server, and let us save this. So now once I save this, I get a new entry here, and I can double click on that, and this should open up my putty. Let me try to increase the font a little bit so that it is visible in a better way. So I will go and make the font size as 16, and my always go-to font for putty is Consolas, and probably we can go with bold. So that's it. I can hit apply, and this has changed. I think now it should be pretty much visible. The first thing I need to provide is my username, and I am logging in as an Ubuntu user, so this is perfect. Now the next step, which is an important step I need to do, is just try to update this. So I can do sudo apt get update -y for confirmation, and this will try to update my installations. So let us try to update if anything is updatable, and generally it doesn't take much time, but yeah, so it is done. Next thing is to run the same command with upgrade option so that it upgrades whatever is installed. So we'll go with this also, and I think this is the one that takes a little bit time, but let's see. I think this should be also done pretty easily. Let us give it a few seconds. I think it should almost be done, but it takes some time. Meanwhile, let us head over to the Docker landing page to kill some time, and if I go for Docker docs, it will give me the first link, which is important. And here you get to see a lot of resources, like you can go for download and install links, go for guides, any manuals or reference documents that you might want to look into, or the old-fashioned DevOps where you can just click on get started and it'll help you understand a lot of things. So this is the place where you can come for reference. And I think it is done. Let me try to hit yes, and this is done. So now as you see, my update and upgrade is done. The next command that I'm going to run to install Docker is going to be sudo apt get install docker.io. This is as simple as it gets. To install Docker, you can run this simple command. It will install Docker on your machine, and if you hit enter, it will ask you a small confirmation whether you want to occupy this amount of storage. I'm going to put yes, and finally it will install Docker. Probably it will ask me for a network configuration once. So let's see if it's going to ask about that, or otherwise it should fire up Docker. Yes, it did ask the network dispatcher service. I'm going to go with the first one. Let's try to hit enter, and Docker is installed. So now here, if you try to clear screen and do docker-v, it gives you the Docker version. Now let us have a look at since it is a clean, it's a completely clean installation, you won't be expecting to see anything here. So okay, so this is a common problem that we face when we try to install Docker. It says got permission denied while trying to connect to Docker daemon, but Docker daemon is already running. The problem here is Docker group has got permissions which are required to interact with Docker commands, but the current user, which is Ubuntu, will not have the user privileges. So for that, what we need to do is go to the sudo shell and just run this command usermod, add this current user to the Docker group, and put here Docker and do the username which you want to add to the Docker group. So this generally does the problem. And by Docker group, I can show you, if you can go to etc/group, it will show you the Docker group is already present. It comes in handy. It comes by default when you install Docker. So now I think I'm already a part of the Docker group. So let's try to go back to the user, and not sudo is not required, su ubuntu, and we'll go to the home directory again, and let's try to see docker ps. Perfect, this runs fine. So Docker PS is the command to view running containers, and Docker PS-A is the command to view all the containers. And we will see these commands in a bit, but just for a sake of trial run, let me try to run a hello world application on Docker and see if it is working fine. So Docker comes with a image called hello world, which you can run and test if your Docker configuration is fine. And the command to run any image on Docker is docker run, and you specify the image name. So this is going to be hello world, and it is not going to find it locally, so it's going to pull from the internet. And as you see, it is telling hello from Docker, and this tells me that Docker is configured correctly. So now if you see, if I go to Docker PS, Docker container is not there, obviously because the container has done its job, and it has exited after doing the job. So probably if you see exited containers, which is all containers, you will see hello world has exited some 20 seconds ago. So this is how you interact with Docker. Now let us talk about images. So Docker images are basically blueprints to the containers. Basically, the containers are created out of images. So if you want to view existing images, you can do Docker images, and it will give you a list of images that you have. And this is Hello World image that just got pulled, and it was created 5 weeks back, or probably I must say it was updated 5 weeks back. Now, every container or every image inside Docker is going to have an ID which you can use in your command. So probably image ID is this one, and your container ID is this one. And maybe if you want to see some logs from the container, so you can do docker ps-a and grab container ID, and then you can do docker logs. Probably since the container is not running, it will not show me most likely. Okay, so this is the logs that I got from the last running container, and this is the same logs that you saw when this hello world started. So that's pretty much it, how you run containers on Docker and how you install Docker. Probably the next thing that we would want to do is see if we can download any other image and what are the commands for interacting with the image. So the first command that we will be needing when we talk about images is a Docker pull. So just to pull an image from just try to pull the image from the Docker Hub. Now Docker Hub is at a to pull images from the available registry, which is Docker Hub. Now, Docker Hub is actually the default registry that you get when you install Docker, and here is where you will see a lot of vendors putting in their images. So you can create an account here. My account is already there. Let me try to log in. And if you see, I have got my username and password here, and let's try to see if I have got um let's see for Apache. If I try to see Apache, this is HTTPD and Tomcat and Maven is there. Let me try to run HTTPD server using Docker, and that will give you a little bit of idea on how we use Docker images to run containers and all of that. So basically the image will also come with instruction of how to pull this image, and you can just copy this command or type it in on your own on the putty. So you can do docker pull httpd. This will pull the Docker image from Docker Hub, and then it will try to save it in your machine. So if you see, it is trying to pull different layers. And now if you do Docker images, and here you see you've got one more new image, which is httpd. Now if you want to run this image, you can do something like docker run, and you can put a detached mode so that it runs in the background, and if you want, you can give it a name, my httpd, and then you can pass in the image ID. So this is most likely will create something, and this is running now. So if you see docker ps, you've got one container running and it is running on port number 80. So probably if I try to go to the host name of my machine and hit port 80, it should give me the Apache page or the HTTPD page. So let me just head over to my instance, and let me try to grab the ID, grab the IP address. I'll go this. I'll take the public one and try to put it in the browser. And if you see, okay, this is giving me some problem, but let me try to use this one. Bad. Did not copy it correctly. Sorry, my bad. I'm copying the public one by the private one. So if you see, it is telling me host not found. DNS error, host did not accept the connection. Let me see what can be done here. Okay, so I got the point. Now here, this is one more important learning that we can take here is that your container is running on a certain port, but that port is not mapped to your machine. So to do that, I'm going to stop this. Okay, stop the container ID, and this is going to stop the container. Now I'm going to do docker ps, nothing is running. Then I will use the same command that we ran before and just put a port information here. So -p map my port 80 to port 80 of the container. Sorry, this name is already taken, my http2. So this is now running, docker ps, this is running. Now if you see, my port of this current machine is mapped with port 80 of the container. So now if I head here and try to refresh, it says it works. So that's how you run a container. And if you want to see the logs of it, so if you do docker logs of the container ID, put it here and you will see there's a get request coming in. So this is the same request we did. And if you try to hit it once again, you will get another get request. So if you try the docker logs, you see there's one more get request here. So that is basically how you work around with containers and images. This is going to be a very short video, but I definitely understand there are a lot of concepts here around Docker, which I'm going to prepare a nice illustrative video to talk about it, but this session was mostly around how to install Docker and get started with Docker and basic commands. So just to recap, what we learned here is Docker installation can be done by apt get install docker, docker.io, and when you want to list containers, you can do docker ps. If you want to list dead containers, you can do docker ps-a. If you want to pull an image, you can do docker pull nginx. This is another image from Docker Hub. And if you want to view your already existing images on your machine, you can do docker images, and you've got new nginx image. And probably if you want to say, suppose, let us say docker ps, this is running, so I'm going to stop this, docker stop, and it's going to stop. If you want me to start this, I can start this as well, docker start, and this is going to start my server. And if I do docker ps again, my container is up and running. I'm going to do docker stop again, and now if I show you docker ps, the container is not running. And finally, when you want to do a cleanup, you can do docker system prune. This is going to remove all dangling containers and remove all images. So now if you do docker ps-a, there's nothing. And if you do docker images, the images are still there, but the containers are deleted. So it specifies here that stopped containers, networks not used by at least one container will be killed, and all dangling images will be killed. So that is basic about Docker. You can install it and try to play around with commands today. And in the next coming video, I'll be telling you more about insights into what exactly Docker is capable of. That was it for this video. See you in the next one. Thank you.